Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. President Joe Biden is facing serious trouble right now in light of what recently happened in Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, polling conducted by NPR shows that his approval rating is only at 43% right now, and it is trending downward. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail what is going on with Joe Biden's presidency, the likelihood that his presidency is effectively over, and the implications for our economy, for our country, and most importantly for your life. So let's take our time, dive into the details, jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, President Joe Biden is in serious political trouble. The recent poll conducted by NPR shows that he only has a 43% approval rating, and it is trending downward. This is in light of what happened in Afghanistan with the withdrawal of our troops. In addition, because of recent spike in the illness due to the new variant, there's a lot of issues that are transpiring in our country, but Afghanistan was at the forefront. So what I want to do right now is talk a little bit about what happened in Afghanistan, the issues surrounding that, and how that's impacting Joe Biden, but more importantly, how that impacts our country directly. As you're likely aware, the United States was attacked back on September 11th, which triggered the war in Afghanistan because that is where the individuals who planned that attack originated from. And since then, since 2001 to 2021, the United States had troops on the ground in various iterations of various forms, but we always had a strong presence there. It wasn't until recently when President Biden removed all the troops from Afghanistan that we no longer had a presence there. And from that perspective, I believe it is important for us to be aware of the fact of a few things. We have been in Afghanistan for nearly 20 years underneath both Republican and Democratic administrations, starting with President Bush, then to President Obama, then to President Trump, and now to President Biden. And from that perspective, polling conducted at the time of President Biden's announcement to withdraw all the troops actually showed the majority of people supporting this withdrawal. But I believe it's important to note that when polls are conducted, people not necessarily think through the implications of what they are saying to the pollster. For example, it'd be very easy for me to say, yes, I want all the troops withdrawn from Afghanistan, not knowing what the implications are politically, but also not necessarily knowing what the logistics are that would entail that type of withdrawal. So even though there was public support, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I'm not here to tell you that. But ultimately, President Biden decided to do that and remove the troops out of that particular country. As a result of this, once the announcement was made, we saw a lot of things happen as it actually began to unfold. Starting with number one, the Afghanistan government actually collapsed. The president of Afghanistan fled the country, then members of the parliament fled, and then other leaders started to leave the country. Then, as a result of that, the military collapsed, even though we had funded it, we had trained it, and provided all sorts of financial and economic support, but more importantly, tactical support to that military. And then ultimately, the Taliban was able to fill that vacuum and then lead themselves all the way to the capital called Kabul. And at the Kabul airport, we saw some of the most heartbreaking images that transpired as people were trying to find a new way forward to not have to deal with the new rule of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Now, this has caused a significant shift in the way Americans were thinking about this particular withdrawal. So recent polling conducted, even though President Biden stuck to his guns and said that he would do the removal by August 31st, which he did, and even though it was a messy approach, he said that he was making the right decision. I'm not here to tell you that it was the right decision or the wrong decision. I'm just telling you what the American people think now, according to recent polling. Now, recent polling conducted shows that a majority of people do not support the way in which President Biden actually removed the troops from Afghanistan. And this has caused his overall approval rating to decline because our people are beginning to question his judgment. As a matter of fact, some senators have even said that they believe that he should be removed via the 25th Amendment, where basically a majority of the cabinet could vote to remove him from office, and then he would be replaced by Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, from that perspective, it is highly unlikely for that to happen, but there are some significant implications based off of what the American people are saying to Biden based off of this polling number, but also what it's going to do to impact his legislative agenda here at home. Now, once again, I'm not here to tell you that doing the thing in Afghanistan was right or the wrong thing. All I can do is try and provide as much information and historical context as possible. We spent trillions of dollars, trained up their military, made tactical decisions that would hopefully help them retain their country, prop up their government, do all sorts of economic stimulus for them, but ultimately that country couldn't hold. And that is something that isn't necessarily unique to the United States because Afghanistan has always had issues throughout the course of its history. And that probably is due to the fact of where it is actually located, the geopolitical dynamic of its surrounding nations, and ultimately because of a lack of stability and also war-torn issues in that particular country, a lack of continuous leadership and stability, which has basically led to where we are today. So now what I want to do is talk a little bit about the implications of the issues in Afghanistan, how they're going to affect us here in the United States. Now, that same poll is showing that a majority of Americans feel less safe because of what happened in Afghanistan. This could be particularly because people think that Afghanistan might turn into a breeding ground for other attacks and other issues that might come back here to the United States and would affect our national security writ large. I think it's it's important to note that even though the United States decided to withdraw from Afghanistan, saying it was one of the longest wars in our history, we still retain troops throughout the world that dates back to even World War II. We have our troops in places like South Korea, we have them in Japan, we have them throughout the world, we even have some in Italy. I mean, there's really stationed all throughout the world. We had 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, which was relatively speaking a very low number. And here myself, I am not a military person, I've not served in the military, so I do not want to project anything other than the fact that I'm trying to give you some factual information so you can derive a proper decision. I've spoken to individuals and had friends and family members who've served, but I haven't personally not, so I do not want to project anything other than that. But I've heard what is said is that it was, relatively speaking, not costing us that much money and not costing that many troops to spend time there by retaining a small amount of troops in Afghanistan for the level of stability that was being controlled there. It really became an issue now that President Biden decided to withdraw in the hasty manner that he did, but also because of the other issues that were not necessarily foreseen, such as the collapse of the Afghanistan government and such as the collapse of their military. We also, as a country, decided to not provide the type of air tactical support after our withdrawal was announced, which didn't allow the individuals who were actually in Afghanistan, those troops, to have the type of support they were accustomed to, which did limit their defense against the Taliban. So from that perspective, we do see that there might have been an argument for us to remain in Afghanistan and maintain that level of stability for the investment that was going to be there. But for the people who have lost their lives, for the individuals who have been injured, for the psychological trauma they've encountered, for the people in Afghanistan, there's a lot of people who would argue that it was time for us to leave. So once again, not here to tell you that it's the right or wrong thing that we did it, just trying to provide you as much factual information as possible and how this is impacting President Biden's agenda right here. Now what we're seeing is after he made this announcement, after the withdrawal happened, after now his poll numbers have plummeted, we're seeing his domestic agenda being directly impacted. As a matter of fact, I recently did a video talking about his idea of having a $3.5 trillion budget passed by both the House and the Senate so that he can advance a legislative agenda that is more center-left and somewhat left in other respects, trying to provide other social services, other financing, other things that would hopefully provide more infrastructure. There's a lot in this particular bill. I have a link in the description if you want to check that out. But one of the key things he needs are two different senators in the United States Senate, and one is named Joe Manchin. And Joe Manchin is from West Virginia, which is a very red type of state, not a state that would vote normally for Joe Biden, but they're very accustomed to voting for Joe Manchin, as he previously served as the governor there. But what we're seeing right now is that he wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying he no longer supports the $3.5 trillion budget for President Biden, and that means that he's effectively killed that bill unless they make modifications to that bill. But the individual who's even writing that bill right now in the Senate is Senator Bernie Sanders, who's a far-left progressive type of politician, so it's hard to see that he's going to make any modifications to it because he has an agenda that he wants to pursue, and President Biden has his own agenda that he wants to pursue. Furthermore, Kyrsten Sinema, who's a senator from Arizona, is seen more as like a John McCain style of politician in Arizona, where she is willing to buck her own party and be kind of an antagonist against her party, and she's indicated that she doesn't support a $3.5 trillion budget. And from that perspective, what we are seeing is that because as President Biden's popularity starts to slip, other people who might support him normally are not as likely to do so because that will also negatively impact them. And that is because politicians at the end of the day are most concerned about getting elected. I know that might be a bit of a jaded way for me to look at it, but it is generally the way that it works. And because Biden will have less popularity, it means that his agenda overall will be less popular, which then means it's less likely for moderate politicians to want to support his agenda. So from that vantage point, I believe it's very important for us to understand that President Biden is going to be going through some very serious challenges here when it comes to advancing his agenda writ large. And the less popular he becomes, the less likely he is to get anything done. And that is also because the 2022 election cycle is just around the corner, and people are going to find themselves less likely to want to align themselves with President Biden if he's less popular than he was before. And if that does happen, once people get into the election cycle, they're less likely to want to pass controversial types of agenda items because that will potentially negatively impact their likely to get reelected. So you might be asking yourself, is Joe Biden's presidency effectively done? Well, I would say the likelihood right now is that he's going to go through rocky terrain over the next few months, and if he cannot correct it, it's going to be very difficult for him to do anything outside of executive action. So from that perspective, this does have a direct impact on our economy, and it does have a direct impact on your life. And from that perspective, I think it's important to know that right now, the infrastructure bill that was originally passed, the $1 trillion bipartisan bill, is likely to become law, and that's going to get passed. But the $3.5 trillion social infrastructure infrastructure or soft infrastructure bill is going to have a much more difficult time getting through now that his approval rating is starting to dip. And that could affect you directly if you were hoping to rely on some of the things that were placed into that bill. Perhaps you're expecting to have more paid family medical leave. Maybe you're expecting to have other social services that would be provided to you. I wouldn't rely on those right now or hope on those to actually become law because it's going to be very difficult. Now, when it comes to other things like appointing new Supreme Court justices, say if Stephen Breyer, a current justice on the Supreme Court, decides to retire, he would still have the advantage of being able to do so as an executive action with the 50 senators that are in the Senate. But it's going to be difficult for him to do anything else moving forward unless he turns it around. And that is because people are starting to question his competency. They're starting to question whether or not he really has control of what's going on as president. I'm not here to tell you that he does or he doesn't, but right now he's going to be a lot weaker moving forward when he actually advances and tries to get anything done. Now, this is something I think is important to be aware of when we think of the context of his presidency as a whole. Previous presidents have generated a lot of media attention, been very passionate speakers. Think of President Obama, or generating a lot of media attention like Donald Trump. But with Joe Biden, it wasn't necessarily that people were so motivated to support him and his agenda. It was almost as though a lot of people were wanting just stability in light of the pandemic and some of the norms that were broken because of the previous administration. So him coming into office, people just expected him to be a competent, governing individual with a lot of experience in Washington, D.C., knowing how to navigate things moving forward. And at the beginning of his presidency, there was a lot perceived that he was doing well. The vaccine rollout was perceived to be going well. We thought that the economy was continuing to tick along, so things were perceived to be going well. It really wasn't until Afghanistan that things started to unravel a bit. Now, that doesn't mean that his presidency is effectively done. It means that he has a chance to correct that, and he's stuck to his guns, says that he made the right decision. He believes that pulling out of Afghanistan was the right thing to do. I'm not here to tell you if it was or wasn't, but that's what he's saying. But I would say right now, unless he turns things around, it's going to be very challenging for him to pass anything. And that has the potential to either negatively impact our economy because there might be certain measures that need to take place. But also when you think about it, sometimes the best action in Washington is no action on certain issues because our economy generally tends to move forward irrespective of what is happening in Washington because administrations change, policies continuously shift, what businesses, what the stock market, what those types of things are looking for. And if they predict that nothing is going to happen in Washington, they will just factor that into how they make their decisions. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's a good or a bad thing for yourself. It's just where things go. But my hope is that we at least have some sort of stability moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few months, if he can actually correct things or if he's going to be continuing to find a negative trajectory where he no longer has a basement. And that is because Biden doesn't necessarily have a super strong base of support, whereas President Trump did have a very strong, solid base of support. So it's potentially likely that he could see his polling numbers continue to dip precipitously and not necessarily rebound. But on the flip side, he could rebound and that could affect his agenda here at home. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. Furthermore, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, do any research on your behalf so you can make wise and well-informed decisions moving forward. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create positive content that makes a positive impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time. Whoosh.